then. Thank you
Yeah,
so
you're welcome.
much. Charlese, hi.
Hi.
Nice to meet you.
Hi.
Nice to see you. Friends, entire University of California, Santa Cruz. This is Charlese Antoinette Jones.
Yes.
And because you know, amazing costume designer with a great body of work behind her, and has a movie coming out very soon. And I'm gonna let her talk about all of that. But I just wanted to say, hey, welcome. And how are you?
Thank you. I'm good. I'm good. It's been really busy. This is my first time doing this much press for a film, and it's kind of cool that I'm at home and it's a pandemic because I'm like, I don't know how I would be out in the streets doing this.
I always start these kind of like talks with just sort of like asking, where you are, where you're zooming in from, and also like what's giving you joy these days.
Oh, yeah, that's really good. So I'm in Jersey City. I relocated back to the East Coast from LA right before the pandemic. Great timing. And what's bringing me joy these days is my cat Cheeto and just rediscovering my love for New York.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Joanna, what's giving you joy today?
Oh my goodness, it's 8 a.m. So I just woke up. That's the real truth.
Friends, just to remind everybody, Joanna's in Singapore.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's giving you joy, if anything, today?
Well, I had a really great day yesterday, so it was really fun. It's just Singapore is really nice and safe in the pandemic right now, so it's been really great to be able to go outside and actually do things and work on shows and
Yeah.
still be living life like it's normal. So yeah.
Yeah, for me, it was my daughter today. I have a 4-year-old,
Oh,
and she played in the snow today because we're still covered with snow. And it was just like watching her through outside the window was really amazing. So it was really, really awesome.
that's
So,
beautiful.
Charlese, you have, for someone as young as you have an impressive like body of work behind
Thank you.
you, and also sort of the tireless advocacy that you're doing for
Oh,
Black designers is
thank
just
you.
unbelievable. Um, Tell us your story, like, where, how did Charlese Antoinette Jones like form, and like what, where were you, like, tell us everything. Like, so how did you get started, first of all? Like, were you born in New York? Like, what's happening?
No, so I was born in the suburbs of DC, actually. So I'm very familiar with everything that's been going on there. um, and I grew up in a very religious Pentecostal family where going to church on Sunday meant you dressed up. So fashion was always very much a part of my life. I learned the rules of menswear going to suit makers and shopping with my father. So that's how I learned about menswear. My mother made our clothes growing up because we couldn't afford name brand stuff. So what we would do was go to the go to get it was a couple of places. So we would go to Gaffey's Fabrics and pick out patterns and the discount fabrics. And then did a lot of thrifting and a lot of discount store shopping. There was a place called Sims that was very popular at the time.
Yes, I love
So
it.
Sims.
Yeah.
So that's how I got my start. Honestly, is growing up with clothes being such a huge part of my life and being able to design my own clothing from young and be like, Mom, I want overalls, but I want it out of this fabric, and so that was really, really fun. And then also I learned how to shop on a budget.
Right.
Shopping at discount stores, at thrift stores with my grandma. My grandmother was on like a disability check, so she didn't have a lot of money to shop, but she always looked fabulous. And I learned how to pull that off with her. So that's like the foundations of like who I am as a fashion being.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
then
yeah.
costume design. I actually went to school for fashion merchandising and marketing.
Uh-huh.
I went to Philadelphia University, which is now called Jefferson University.
Uh-huh.
And I went there thinking I was going to get like a foundation of fashion business, but I was going to, be a designer one day. And then I got recruited out of college for Macy's from Macy's or by Macy's as a product development assistant, which meant I was like sitting at a spreadsheet, you know, at a computer, crunching numbers on a spreadsheet all day, and I hated it.
Right.
So I quit. Like after like 3 months, I think I quit, and I was like, I'm going to become a stylist, because how did I learn about styling? Back then, because I'm not as young as I look. I am young, but I'm not as young as I look. The idea of becoming a stylist or a costume designer, it wasn't like as accessible as it is now, right?
Right.
So I learned about stylists through watching the Style Network, which was this new channel. When I was in college, the Style Network was this brand new channel, and it was
Yeah.
about fashion and style. And at night, they would show runway shows on a loop from Europe, right? And New York Fashion Week, different fashion weeks. So I would watch that. And I actually learned about styling because they ended up interviewing Robert Verdi, because he was like one of the top stylists
Yes,
at the time. And he was styling Halle Berry and all these people. And I
yeah.
was like, that's the job? That sounds cool. So that's how I learned about styling. So it was cool because like I was getting my fashion business education by day, and by night I was watching fashion television and like learning about all the runway shows and, you know, stuff like that. So when I moved to New York, I had this perception of what, you know, working in the industry was going to be, and I didn't think it was going to be sitting crunching numbers. So as I said, I quit, and I ended up taking a couple courses at FIT to start my portfolio as a stylist. And so by the time I finished that professional education, it was like a continuing education course, and I still take continuing ed courses at FIT. They're amazing. Like if I have time off, I'll take a continuing ed course, because it's like,
Yeah.
why not, right? And
the teachers are really amazing because they're all
They're
working
amazing.
professionals. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
folks,
They're
FIT
amazing.
continuing education classes, amazing.
And they're online now, which is amazing because it opens it up for like so many more people to take the classes around the country. So,
and it's also a state school, which means it's a lot cheaper than everything else. So that's also important to remember.
Work.
I just took a drawing class, 2 or 3 drawing classes last summer, because I was stuck in the house during the pandemic and was like, I need to practice my drawing. I'm getting rusty, you know? So yeah, I took that class. I started my portfolio. I started assisting people. I felt like I liked styling, but I was always a huge fan of movies and have been drawn to the costumes in movies, and didn't realize that's why I was drawn to certain movies. And I was walking around New York City seeing all these things filming, all these trailers, wardrobe trailer. I'm like, well, how do I get on a wardrobe trailer? Like, how do I meet these people, right? I was lucky enough that I got an opportunity to work New York Fashion Week for about 10 seasons. I worked New York Fashion Week, so about 5 years. And I would network at Fashion Week because like that's what everyone's there to do. And I ended up just like, and at that time in my life, I just like talked a lot about whatever it is I was trying to do. Anyone who would hear, I would talk. I was probably annoying. So I ended up talking my way into a job on a movie. I had a woman come up to me. Her name's Javier Lam, and she was like, "Hey, I'm gonna be assistant designing this movie with Michael Douglas." And I was like, "What?" And she was like, and I had, you know, I don't know if everybody knows, but if you don't go to like school for costume design, it's really hard to break into costume design if someone in your family, like, or you don't know someone in the business. It's extremely hard. And it's particularly hard for people of color, like just like full disclosure, right? So I was like, I'll do anything, you know what I mean? Like, this is my way, because I couldn't figure it out, you know? And so it was an internship. So I worked for free. And I interned on this movie called Solitary Man, starring Michael Douglas, Susan Sarandon, and Danny DeVito.
Yes.
Ella Mirajnik was one of the costume designers, and the second costume designer was Jenny Gehring.
Yes.
And so that was my first internship, unpaid job. From there, I got referred out to do paid work as a costume PA, because that's like the first position you can get, or a costume production assistant. So I ended up doing a pilot with David Robinson, and his assistant was Meredith Markworth Pollock, who just finished doing Dynasty. And so, yeah. So like, you know, I worked for some, and at the time she was still assisting. And so when she started her career, she brought me on as her assistant and her shopper, and, you know, kind of helped get me into the business. And her and I are still dear friends to this day. And she doesn't even see it that way. She was just like, no, you're cool. I'm like, whatever, you know? Yeah, so that's how I got my start, and I just worked my way up. You know, I assisted Meredith for a while. I assisted a couple other costume designers, and then I started getting referred out for jobs as costume designer. First doing commercials,
Right.
did a lot of commercials, and then my first film as costume designer was in 2012, and that was Newlyweds with Shaka King,
Yeah,
who I
yeah.
just did Judas in the Black Messiah with. So yeah.
That's amazing. It seems like you actually follow the sort of like, PA apprentice, like
Hmm.
assistant path, that most of
Hmm.
us like do, right? But like, and it seems like for you, the path was, really just like making yourself present in those like situations and knocking on those doors. And I really love what you said about like, usually these opportunities are not available for people of
Hmm.
color, particularly Black folk, and I think part of that too is that we don't consider a lot of like families of color. Actually, I know,
Hmm.
like in the Filipino culture, nobody thinks of the arts as like a viable career like option. Like, what, you're not going to be a nurse, or you're not going to be a, you know what I mean? Like, and I think
Hmm.
that's sort of like, it's interesting that right now, there are many paths to a viable career in the arts, and
Hmm.
particularly in design. And so it's really inspiring you. It's inspiring to hear you say that. I also just like looking at your body of work, by the way, like all the names that Charlese has just mentioned, like Ellen Mirojnick is basically what doing.
Bridgerton.
Yeah,
You know
yeah.
what I mean? So like let's not even, also friends, we're gonna put Charlize's like website and information in the description of this video, just so you folks know. But Charlese, like I think, as I go sort of like deeper into like when like looking at your body of work, it seems like you have never been afraid to be political. You
Mm.
always kind of like looked at your projects have always been kind of like really, it was like you pick projects that are not surface, like you pick
Mhm.
projects that actually make a dent in social justice. Like, was that on purpose, or like how did that like all factor into your like work and the way you work and what you believe in, all that?
I think part of it is because I'm a Black artist. It's kind of hard to avoid that at times, even
Yeah.
when I want to. And a lot of times, the stories that I'm telling are about the diaspora, and a lot of our stories are very political.
Yeah.
But I am also drawn to things and stories that have depth. I don't get inspired by reading a rom-com script necessarily, even though right now I'm kind of like, I'll take it.
I feel you. Any rom-com.
I'm like, it,
Mhm.
it, it might be easier because Judas took a lot out of me. I'm not gonna lie. So yeah, I've always been drawn to things that have depth, and stories that the characters have an interesting journey and overcome any challenges or obstacles. I think when I have stories like that and characters like that, it's a lot easier for me to get inspired about what their journey is through clothing as well, and how that syncs up to their journey as a character. I think sometimes it's hard when someone's just kind of like middle of the road, flat, the entire, movie. They're just kind of the same. Um, like the second movie I did was The Inevitable Defeat of Mr. and Pete. And that's about, these two boys who have this crazy summer where their mothers are missing. And what ended up being great about that was Michelle Obama screened that at the White House to talk about childhood poverty.
Yeah.
And I had no idea that's where that movie was going to end up, but I was drawn to the story because it was a story about these two kids like taking care of each other and being resilient, and just like everything they went through in the summer while they were left alone.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. That's really profound. I love what you said about like, the personal is the political. Like you know what
Hmm.
I mean? Like that, we're drawn to stories that actually have something to do with our life and, our kind of like lived experience. And I think, part of when we were sort of designing this course for UCSC was that they were asking us like, how do you decolonize the
Yeah.
costume process? And I'm like, I don't I don't know, but why don't we start with like, let's talk to people who don't look like who usually gets to do the job. You know
Right.
what I mean? Like, what? Let's start with like there. And so, what is your process, Charlize? Like when you take on a project, like let's just say, I'm sure it changes from project to project, but what would that process be from beginning to end? For you.
I mean, it always starts with research. No matter what kind of project it is, like you have to do research. You have to research if it's a period piece, your period. If it's like a more fashion forward piece, you got to research the designers and the current collections, and from there you pull inspiration for your characters. So it always, always, always starts with research, and then from there, there's like series of conversations I have with the director or the showrunner if it's TV about the characters, and the writers. Like what does this character do for a living? Like where do they like to hang out? Like just these weird questions that you wouldn't think matters, and pertains to clothing, but it ends up informing me a lot as to like what the person would wear, even down to like, are their shoes clean or dirty? And like, okay, if they're a bartender, they're probably dirty because if they're behind the bar, they're spilling stuff on themselves all day long, right?
Yeah.
Or if they ride a motorcycle, how does that inform the way their jeans wear in and their boots wear in? Like there's just so many questions like that inform clothing. So it's a lot of research. It's a lot of collaborative conversations. A lot of gathering data, and then putting together your ideas either in sketch form and mood boards, and then pitching them. And people don't understand that. It's like, okay, yeah, no, I don't just like design this whole thing and then whatever I say goes. It's like, no. Then you have to pitch it.
You have to
And
talk about it, right?
yeah, you have to pitch it. You have to pitch it to the director. You have to pitch it to the showrunner. You have to get approvals on your initial concept, and then start the process of procuring things. So you're procuring individual pieces of clothing. If it's contemporary, you're procuring fabrics, and different findings and finishings. Buttons, elastic, making sure the elastic's the right width. Like it's so the procuring process is very intense, and I love it. It's actually my favorite part. I love the like hunt. It feels like hunting and gathering, right?
Yeah.
And it's scavenger hunt. Like I love it. That's like my favorite part.
Yeah.
So like, and then from there, building costumes, putting together looks, doing fittings, getting approvals again.
Right.
Shoot.
Right. And then shoot, and then
Yeah.
be on set, and then all over. Like every single day is a mini version of that big process, right?
Until you're done.
Until you're done. But Charlize, do you pick your own like the people that you work with? Like, is that like because I think that a lot of folks don't understand is that particularly in movies, you are the costume designer, but you're also a department head.
Yes.
And what is that like?
I love having a team, but sometimes it's really hard when you're sitting here trying to think and come up with an idea, and someone else is like, what do you want me to do? What do you want me to do? What do you want me to do?
Right.
And you're like, hold on, it's coming to me. Like, give me a second. I'm trying to get this idea together.
Yeah.
And give me a minute. I'm like, hey, give me a minute, so that managing that and like being balanced and kind, through that process, because sometimes people will talk to you and like wreck your train of thought, and you're like, that idea was right there, right? So
I laugh because I know exactly what you mean.
You know what I mean?
It was just right there and it's gone.
It's like same thing with like, I'm sure having children and you're like in the middle of something and your kid comes up. But but I love working with people, and I love having a team and working collaboratively. I think I don't think enough is said about the job of a costume designer and how you're only as good as your team.
Amen.
And the reason why Judas and the Black Messiah looks so good is because I had a really good team, and everybody came in and gave like 110% every day and was passionate about the project, and it shows. So, I always like to explain to people, like, I didn't do all this by myself. Yes, I'm the department head. Yes, it was my concept. These are my ideas. This is my direction. you know, but I have, you know, you have so much support when you're especially when you're on a feature film and it's a certain budget level, like you have a lot of support. Like I
Yeah.
think Ellen said she had like 230 something people in her costume shop building the costumes for Bridgerton, you know, like, you know, she's choosing the color direction and the fabrics and everything, but you know, 200 something people built all those costumes, right? You
Amen.
know,
There's
and
a
so
whole industry that's
it's
up
a whole
now,
industry.
by the way. So, you know,
Hmm.
so there's a whole, you know, there's like from the smallest, you know, the people who distress things to like the shoe, everything is like, it's all,
Everything.
everything is that. So thank you for mentioning that. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. Um, Joanna, did you have a question or?
I was just really enjoying, we were watching Astronomy Club last night and really, really loving it. So it was just so fun to watch, I think, like a comedy show that just was refreshing and interesting and like Clint said, political
Hmm.
in a way that it feels like I haven't seen it in other places and on
Yeah.
Netflix of all places. So I was like,
Hmm.
great. I'm so glad, especially now with Netflix, that it's so accessible to everyone.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No.
The costumes were fun on that one. That was a hard one because like we had like not a lot of money and not a lot of time. And I was really happy with how it turned out and just how fun and creative I got to be because um, you know, sketch comedy is like a whole nother beast. It's a
Yeah.
whole nother beast. It was my first time doing sketch comedy. I don't know if I'll do it again, but but I'm glad I did that one. I'm really happy with how the costumes came out because, you know, like when you're doing a feature film or a series, you're kind of beholden to like one look or period, right? Every single episode was like a new breakdown, a new decade, a new day, you know what I mean? Like fantasy to sci-fi. It was all over the place.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And we had 35 sketches initially. So that's 35 different kinds of looks, you know? And I was like, how the am I going to do this? Like I redid that budget so many times. It was like, y'all, I'm going over it. I was like, I'm going over, and
Yeah.
y'all just gonna have to figure it out. And I did, and they did.
I love the way that looked. What I loved about it is that it was so untortured.
Mhm.
It was very fresh, you know, and you describe the process that you just like you're basically just reacting to something to stimuli like right there. It's like costume improv, right? Like it's just like literally like you get a prompt and then you run and you know and I love that and it shows in the work. It's really fresh, but also fresh, but like well thought of. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
Thank you,
the color work is really amazing. You know,
thank you.
it's just
The details were amazing.
yeah.
So the what was it? The Dungeon and Dragon spoof. I don't know why I can't remember the name of it right now. We stayed up till like 2 in the morning, like bedazzling stuff and
Story of my
making
life.
capes, and it was insane, and went to bed for like 2 hours and came back to work the very next morning, but it
Oh,
looked great.
it's amazing, and you have it on film for posterity, you know. So it's
Yeah.
amazing. Let's go back to you know. I know you say, "Oh, I can't," like you know, I'm a black woman and I don't really do like. I think you know, it just gravitate towards the stories that tell my story, and I totally respect and understand that. But
Mhm.
like, I think the projects that you pick are especially potently political, right? And so like,
Mhm.
and I was just talking to you about this before Joanna came on, and they're not just political, they're in your face political, you know. And so I mean that's to me like mad respect, like that, you know, the stuff that even way before like you know all of these like satires are like
Mhm.
you know now like very fashionable, like you know like Get Out or
Mhm.
Us, you know, like
Mhm.
like the stuff that you were doing before that was really really political. So turning into sort of like this political film, Judas and the Black Messiah, right?
Mhm.
Uh, Tell us about like what the film is, and tell us about a little bit about like you know what that process has been. You know.
Yeah, sure. So Judas and the Black Messiah is about the life and untimely murder of Chairman Fred Hampton by the Chicago police and the FBI. And it's also about him establishing the Illinois Black Panther Party, but it's told through the lens and the eyes of William O'Neill, who was actually an FBI informant planted into the Illinois chapter of the Black Panther Party. So it's very interesting to watch a movie from that perspective, and you know, and because it's like a third person kind of experience. You know, I feel like a lot of biopics are like with the person, you know, like so like you know, like when you see a movie like Selma or whatever, it's like you're seeing a lot more of like what the figurehead is like going through. But this is through like the informant's eyes, and just like, so you see like the purity behind the movement and him being conflicted about being an informant, and even saying at one point, you know, these people aren't terrorists, you know. And so I was drawn to the project, one, because Shaka King and I are collaborators. We did, like I said before, we did both of our first features together that ended up going to Sundance, and kind of in a way was like a part of like this Black film renaissance that's been happening, you know, and you know, so because the year our film went was the same year that Fruitvale Station won, and that's how Shaka met Ryan Coogler, who ended up producing this movie. So so yeah, so the film is so important because it tells the story of what was happening in Chicago with Chairman Fred's work around establishing a rainbow coalition. So in the movie, you'll see various gangs that have been turned into political organizations, because what was happening at the time was everybody was suffering under these terrible conditions who were poor in Chicago, still happening. You know, they were being brutalized by the police. There wasn't good education in their communities. There wasn't good food options, you know, in their communities. And a lot of these things like we're still dealing with today in America and all over the world. Chairman Fred had this amazing idea, like, hey, I'm going to get all the poor people together of all races, form this rainbow coalition, and fight back and demand, you know, what we need for our children, because it was about the children ultimately. A lot of what they were doing was about feeding the children and educating the children.
Yeah.
So it was really awesome because, one, I didn't know that part of his story. The part of the story I knew was that he was murdered. Yeah. I didn't understand why he was murdered. I didn't know why it was such a big deal that they would want to murder him, right? Which is something you and I were kind of speaking on earlier, Clint. Right. Like, why when someone seeks to unite all poor people of different races, do they get killed?
Yeah.
Well, I think
go ahead.
You know, I think it's because, if we want to, like, to be frank, the country that we live in is built on this neo-imperialistic capitalist system, right? And and the way that they, you know, keep things in the status quo and, you know, stay in power is by convincing all white people, including poor white people, that whiteness is like the most important thing, and that you're not poor, you're just like a temporarily disadvantaged millionaire. And all these people, brown people, black people, taking your jobs are in the way of you becoming a millionaire, right? Yep. And so that is what they have convinced, you know, the large majority of white people in this country who are affluent. And so that's why you saw the storm the Capitol thing happen. It all goes back to this, right?
Yep.
It all goes back to this. But during this time, Chairman Fred was like, hey guys, we're all the same. We're all dealing with the same stuff because we're all poor. And the Young Patriots, which was the Appalachian group, and they had Confederate flags up in their headquarters, and Chairman Fred, as a black man, walked up in there with the Confederate flags on the wall and was like, hey, I feel you, and that's what you believe, and you believe in the Confederacy, but you're getting beat up by the cops just like we are. Yep. So let's figure this out together. And he was successful in doing that, and J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI, like, didn't want it to happen, so they had him killed.
Yeah, I love exactly what you were saying about this, because a lot of folks actually nowadays, we talk a lot about like BIPOC, right? Black, Indigenous, and people of color. We say that so much now. But what folks don't realize is that, all these civil rights leaders were actually starting to do that. But every time they start to do a coalition like that, they get killed, right? And so I think part of, like, to me, what's scary about that is because it is a centralized power. You're waking people up, right? And I remember there's a quote, a Fred Hampton quote, that he says, "We don't fight capitalism with Black capitalism, we fight that with socialism," right? And then socialism has this like really bad kind of like connotation, in our society right now. But like when you look at the Black Panthers and what Fred Hampton were doing, and they were setting up free clinics, food pantries, free clinics for people who could not afford healthcare, right? Food pantries, organizing for the poor, all of this, like really like
childcare,
right? Radical things that the government was not giving, right? And so, it's unbelievable to me that that an idea like this, right, is so revolutionary and dangerous that you could get killed.
I would like to note, like, in addition to that, really quickly, the reason why schools have free breakfast and free lunch for children is because of the Panthers. The Panthers started that, and then the Department of Education and local school districts adopted it. But that was started by the Panthers. So if anyone out there who's from the States, lives in the States, had free breakfast as a child, it's because of the Panthers.
That's because of the Panthers. Exactly.
Because of the Panthers.
And
I remember it always boggled my mind that in New York City, they always said, like, if you had a snow day, that was always a really big problem, because then so many kids would go without lunch and food. And the idea that like all these children in New York City, like that's like literally like if you had a snow day, which was supposed to be fun and exciting for everyone, that meant no food. Like it just.
Yeah. Well, they're doing pickups during the pandemic, where parents can go pick up the food, as the kids are being homeschooled, doing virtual school. Because my sister picks up her kids' lunch every day, and she's like, "This is great."
Right. And I just love sort of like this idea that now, and I'm very excited because the movie's coming out in next month.
February 12th.
Yeah, February 12th. And, to educate a new generation, like, all of these, like, the people who support like the Green New Deal and Bernie think it's a new revolutionary idea. It's like, no, look, just look back a little bit. You'll see who started it. And you'll see that, all of these are not original ideas, but it's dangerous because it challenges the status quo. Going back to the design, I showed a couple of slides, but let me share my screen again, because it's so beautiful.
That color work is gorgeous.
Thank you.
It is just so beautiful. So let's talk a little bit about like, what were the challenges for this particular design, Charlese?
Wow. Okay. So like, I had like 5 weeks of prep.
5 weeks of prep.
5 weeks of prep.
Oh my God.
Wow.
I had
not a lot.
Not a lot.
Not a lot. That's not a lot.
I had an ensemble cast of about 9 people that pretty much were in the majority of the film. So it was a lot of changes, on a given day. We would have like 9 to 10 trailers, and I would have to approve everyone, and they might be changing 2 to 3 times a day, so it was very busy. It was very, very busy. Logistically, it was also challenging. We were shooting in Cleveland, started prep in LA for about, I think like 2 weeks. And then flew to Cleveland, got, helped get everything started with the supervisor that was already there. The supervisor went early. And I stayed behind to do fittings with Lakeith and Ashton. And also Daniel had a body double. I couldn't fit him until he came to Cleveland, so I had to fit a body double.
This is Daniel Kaluuya and Lakeith Stanfield, folks.
Yes. So I stayed behind in LA to do those fittings, and then she went ahead and got the office going and started prep. In Cleveland, we had a shopper in Cincinnati who was also pulling from Atlanta.
Right.
And then we were pulling from costume houses in LA. Um, I ended up finding an amazing resource in Fresno and like he had like dead stock vintage from a department store that he bought out years ago. And he just let me like go through everything and load my car up as much as I could. And, you know, I spent a couple $1,000s with him on that. And a lot of leather jackets that ended up on our principals were from him. Children's sneakers that ended up on the kids from him. And so,
Hard
yeah, it
things to
was just,
find.
sorry. Yeah, yeah.
Hard things to find.
Yes, yes. I mean, and they were like in the box, brand new, like these little PF flyers, like baby kid,
Yeah.
tiny size. Brand new. It was insane. I was like, how do you have all this
That's
stuff?
That's amazing. And folks, for non-costume or non-film folks, you know, when Charlese says dead stock, it means it's vintage clothing. And by the way, Charlese hasn't even spoken about that. This is a period movie, clearly.
Right.
About the Black Panthers, set in the 1968, 1972? When is it?
Oh no, 69, 1969.
69. So 1969, and so dead stock is basically vintage clothing that has never been worn, right? So she found a large pot of this. But Charlese, talk a little bit about, like, you know, aside from your principals, right? So principals are basically all of these like recurring characters that are the lead characters. But you also dress literally hundreds
Everyone.
of people for.
It was 1,100.
Thank
Oh
you.
my God.
Yeah, a little over 1,100, maybe like 1,153. I can't remember the last count. Plus stunt guys, plus cops. Okay, so in order to achieve that, we had to have so much clothes. We had so much clothes, and that's what I was saying about the logistics of it all. Clothes was coming from all over the country, and you know, and we ended up having someone in LA who would pull for us last minute if they, you know, cast people and ship it to us. We were constantly fitting, so my key and another customer, and sometimes the supervisor would jump in. Like we had fittings, background fittings going pretty much every day, all day long, while we were doing principal fittings and shooting. So while we were shooting, fittings were like continuously happening, either the background fittings on pretty much a daily basis, or we also had like day players coming in, people being cast last minute, like 2 days before they work, the day before they work. Martin Sheen flew in Saturday and he worked on a Monday.
Wow. Yeah, I know exactly what that's like.
Yeah, it was pretty nuts, and it was like my birthday weekend, and I was like, can I not work on my birthday, guys? No. Yeah, like we actually shot the scenes with Martin Sheen on my actual birthday, which was pretty cool. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, I think this is so exciting to talk about because I just went through this with respect, right? So when Charlese says background fittings, that means like all of the, you know, we call them background players, but they, you know, but they're otherwise known as extras, you know, but like we don't use that term anymore. We use background players. So, you know, you have a whole team of costumers who are basically fitting those in vintage clothing, because by the way, you know, you can't really get these clothes at the local Kmart or Macy's or Walmart, right? Like maybe you can get a pair of jeans and for like the really, really far away background, but like these are vintage clothing that, by the way, also don't come in a wide range of sizes, right? So folks are being fit on a daily basis because this is a political film, and like because it is about the Panther, they dealt with crowds. They were feeding hundreds of children. So just imagine sort of the daily grind of like really putting all of these people in period clothing before you send them off to hair and makeup.
Yeah, it was crazy. I mean, and we didn't even get to fit everyone in advance. It was like, okay, we'll give you like half, and then the other half you got to fit on the day. And so it was like the people we fit ahead of time would be pushed to the front, and the people we fit on the day would be pushed to the back as filler. And we did ask people to bring things like turtlenecks, you know, like simple, you know, and so thankfully, and mock necks, because, you know, thankfully came back in style in the last couple of years. I mean, even some of the mock necks that I use on Daniel are from like Zara, because I couldn't find any other mock necks that I liked, you know, that were vintage, and I'm not making, we didn't have time to make sweaters. So he's wearing Zara.
Aside from the fact that that's, you know, like it's so expensive to have somebody knit a sweater, you know, and it's
Mhm.
just, there's just so much money that's involved. And, you know, I found what's really profound is like, we did the same thing where you have somebody in LA sort of pulling as the things happen. But a lot of like the budget is like about shipping, because trying to get those,
Mhm.
you know, so if you don't have like really good prep work, you could potentially spend a lot of money.
Yep.
So Charlize, let me just, you know, with that, with the stills that we saw, there was also a lot of like, I mean, it's a period movie. So did you how did you work with like the hair department and the makeup department? Like, so what is that like, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I shared all my research with them. So I did a ton of research, and they did their own research, obviously. But like for example, there was one image of Cha Cha Jimenez, who was the leader of the Young Patriots,
Yeah.
that I found that was in color, and it was literally the only picture online that was in color, and his hair was red. And so I was like, oh, I told the hairstylist, I was like, oh my God, her name is Rebecca. I was like, Rebecca, Chacha's hair was red. Because all the pictures that she had and I had seen up until the point I found that one photo, were in black and white. And so it's like kind of hard to tell. And so she was like, oh my God, are you serious? His hair's red? Like, how do you know? And I was like, I'm gonna find this photo. I'm gonna find this photo. I'm gonna send it to you. And I sent it to her, and she was like, oh my God, this is crazy. I had no idea his hair was red. And she ended up doing a wig for him, and his
Yeah.
hair is red, and you can see a little bit of it peeking out of the beret.
Yeah.
And thankfully we did that because the actual Cha-Cha came to set.
Yeah, so Chacha Jimenez, you know, was a very famous, again, activist. You know, there was the Puerto Ricans also had their own thing called the Young Patriots, or Young Lords, you
Young
know,
Lords, yes.
which were doing, you know, they were doing exactly what, you know, what the Black Panthers were, and they got together just like superheroes get together and like, you know, help the community and all that. And of course, all of them got in trouble because they were doing something awesome. Um, and so that's amazing that, you know, and that sort of collaboration kind of like has to happen on a daily basis, right?
Yeah.
And what was it like dressing mostly like male characters, you know, particularly, you know, like male characters with like gun toting, like, you know, like militants, and what was that like, you know?
I love menswear,
Yeah.
so it was a lot of fun for me. And also, even though they were revolutionaries and they were militant and they carried guns, they were still humans,
Yeah.
and they had varying interests. So that informs, how they wore what they wore. So, like for example, Ashton Sanders, who plays Palmer. So if you notice, like whenever Palmer shows up in a scene, he's like really stylish. He's like pushing more towards 70s, and he's just like that really stylish like street dude, right? And he's like really militant, like plays no games, really walking the walk, talking the talk, and he looks cool doing it, smoking a cigarette, flicking a cigarette, right? So like he was a really fun character to dress because there's no one really like him until O'Neill starts making money and kind of starts copying his style because he sees him as being super authentic. um Algie, who plays Jake Winters, he's like a goody two shoes, like church boy, choir boy, like so he's the only one that kind of wears he wears like a shirt and tie. He wears a lot of like sweater vests with collared shirts and cardigans, and like he's like a little bit more formal and like buttoned up than everyone. He's a lot younger, but he's the best shooter out of the group. um, and then you have Chairman Fred, who is a former athlete turned activist. So his look is very collegiate. It's very simple. And also, once he starts doing more organizing, he starts wearing more militant kind of clothing, camo pants, army boots. He's got his corduroy jacket, which is sturdy. He's very simple. He's not really doing it for fashion. He's not like Palmer, who's like,
Yeah.
cares about the latest trends. He's like utility and just organizing and about the people and not really thinking about himself in that way. O'Neill's all over the place. He doesn't know what he's doing. He doesn't know who he is. So you see his journey was a lot of fun because he's just all over the place. As the movie goes along, you're just like, what is he gonna show up in next? And that just and that just kind of lends itself to his character's journey where he's like, he's a young kid impersonating a Fed. And then he's a young kid who's like learning about this political ideology, but he's also an informant. So do I wear a suit now? Or do I dress like Palmer because I'm a Panther now?
Right.
Or do I dress like the Oakland Panthers I see pictures of? So now I'm wearing a leather jacket and a beret and, and a turtleneck and, like, so he kind of all over the place.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
even when the film ends, you're like, you still don't know who you are. So that was really fun. So it was a lot of fun because even though they're all guys, they all have specific journeys and very different backstories. And me and the director sat and talked about each one of their the writer director, because he was also a writer, sat and talked about each one of their journeys. And I remember when we talked about Palmer specifically, he was just like, oh, he's got to be like the coolest guy in the entire headquarters.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
He was
yeah.
just like very specific about it. And so I was happy that I got to play a lot with his character, and I got to and I got to play with Lakeith's character in that way. And everybody wasn't just in like the same uniform. We got to really play and show different characters through clothing, versus just making it like a cosplay of what people think Panthers look like. Like, no,
Yes,
they were humans, they
yeah,
were
yeah,
individuals.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that articulation of that, because I think to me what's so exciting is like what happened that morning when, when they put on those clothes, like what were they
Mhm,
feeling? You know what I mean?
mhm.
I got sometimes I have like fight directors or stunt people, like stunt directors basically telling me, "Oh, can you put her in sneakers because she's gonna get beat up?" Like, and I'm like, "Well, I don't know if she woke up that morning to whoa." You know what I mean? Like it always is funny where the disconnect is. You know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
no, she dressed up. She was gonna go to work, so she put on heels, and then
Yeah.
it's
I also
it's also it's fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah.
I also really love the distinction in the research too, right? Like the Oakland
Thank you.
Panthers look different from the Cleveland Panthers, and like
Yeah.
all of that is so specific. And I
Mhm.
I can't even imagine like what some of that research looks like.
It's dope. So I came across these photos by a Japanese photographer. Can't remember his full name. I'll have to send it to you. It's Hiroshi, and I always forget his last name. But there's pictures of a couple of the Illinois Panthers in the snow in Chicago, on the train tracks with a leather gloves with a fist in the air and these camo green jackets, and they were World War II jackets and berets. And actually, they actually also had a patch on their arm, with an illustration of a panther, but we decided to not do that, for various reasons, because a lot of the emblems and stuff are very special, to the party, and we just didn't want to like overstep in that kind of way.
Right.
Um, and Chairman Fred Jr. was on set with us every day, and he like would be like, "You can't use that," like, you know what I mean? And so yeah, like through my research, I was like, "Oh my god, they weren't really wearing a lot of leather." And I as I kept looking at more and more photos, I was like, wow, they were really wearing these camo jackets. And just like upon further inspection, and actually went to one of the costume houses in LA that specializes in military of all decades and eras, and was like, show them this photo. Like, I think this is like Korean War or maybe earlier. Can you help
Right.
me figure out where this jacket is from? And they helped us figure out it was World War II. And so we took all the World War II jackets they had and then scoured the internet and eBay for more. And so that's how we ended up with so many for our ensemble.
That makes so much sense, because why would they put like a Vietnam jacket, something that they opposed, you know what I mean? So like
Mhm.
just the choice of that, sort of like how they militarize, is so fascinating, and I love what you said about like, they didn't wear a lot of like leather, because that's another flavor of Panthers, perhaps in the West Coast, that was like actually doing a lot of that like that. So I love that research. I could just bury my head in that, So I'm so excited to see that movie, Charlize.
Thank you. Thank
Ah,
you.
so
Yeah.
super, super excited. But also those two actors are unbelievable,
Yes.
And I think part of like, I think what's so great about costuming is that you're able to actually support the work of these
Mhm.
artists, with what they're wearing. To like pivot a little bit, can you to us a little bit about this particular project? I love this project called Lasercism, right?
Oh, that's also a Shaka King project. He wrote
So
that and directed that, and Lakeith is in that as well.
Lakeith is in there, and
Mhm.
tell us about this again, highly political, also highly
Satirical.
satirical before people got all satirical on us. You know what I mean? So here's one of the stills, and that's Davine. You know, I've worked with Davine.
Yes, Divine. Yes, 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 Divine.
So tell us about this project.
So it's basically a satire about and it's an infomercial.
Yeah.
And it's like basically, do you want to like stop being racist and get this laser treatment? Like change your vision so you're not racist anymore. But it's the way it's done is just really smart and it's really funny. And it was cool because I got to put Lakeith in like some contemporary clothing by a Black designer friend of mine, and he's so cool. He's just like down for whatever. And it was awesome because like normally on infomercials you don't really see a guy looking like this doing an infomercial. So it was just like a fun juxtaposition to play with, and everyone else in the piece looked like typical infomercial types, but he's like totally standing out as like the person who invented this technology, I guess.
I love the work that you did here because it is so on point, and it is just so like, here, I'm gonna stop sharing, I'm gonna share another photograph. It is just even the flatness of like, and just the sort of quote unquote ordinariness of the
Yes,
was
yes,
just
very
so,
ordinary.
yeah, it was so just I love how like you actually coast the sort of like, presentational and ordinary. I also this is a show that that you designed basically all of the episodes for Raising Dion, or most of the episodes, right?
So yeah, that one's tricky. So I came in like mid-season and took over, but the way they were shooting it is I have my hands in each of the episodes because they were like block shooting it. So some characters weren't designed yet that end up in like the first two episodes and third and fourth episodes. And it was particularly I can't remember the character's name, I'm sorry y'all. The director of Bayona, which is the amazing Asian actress Ali. So
Alian.
Alian, yes.
Yeah.
So her character hadn't been designed yet. So when I came on board, I had to, because we were shooting all the episodes, all the scenes that took place in Bayona from all the episodes, we were block shooting it in like a couple of days. So when I came in, she was about to start. So I had to design her character and finish off like the previous episodes that weren't done. So it was pretty hectic. But we got to do a lot of fun stuff with her. And her stuff is a mixture of like archival vintage stuff that I was getting from this really dope consignment shop in Atlanta, and stuff that was currently in the stores like contemporary. That was a Yagal Ezra.
Yagal Israel.
And I can't remember what year it was from, but it was one of the pieces I got at the consignment shop, and I paired it with like that necklace was from Koss. Like just wanted to look futuristic and weird and just slightly off, and she
but
like
also
has money.
Like we know we can identify it, but it's just like odd, Folks, when Charlese says block shooting, it means they're not shooting in sequence. It means that they're gonna like shoot, like if in a series of episodes, they're gonna shoot all of the episodes that probably are set in that location, and all the actors come in. So it's a jumble of like episodes. You have to keep track of all of it, in terms of the.
It was nuts.
I also love this particular look because I know that guy, and I know where he shops. I know, the ordinaries of that khaki and that plaid, so good. Like it gives us a sense of history of her,
Yeah, because that's the Spellman dorm. This was established before I got there, but yeah, that's the Spellman dorm. And then part of this costume was established before, part of the superhero costume was established before I got there. And I ended up adding like the purple do-rag and the purple cape to it. Yeah. So, like I said, I had touches and hands and everything. And some characters I fully designed. And then some characters, their journey, I came in around the time their journey changed. So there's like an abrupt change. For example, in in his wardrobe. And I'm so sorry, y'all, I can't remember character names. I'm like major fail.
It's
Um,
okay.
um, and um, and Josh Ritter's character. So he kind of, as his palette gets darker, that's when you start seeing my work come in. And I don't know if everybody's seen the show, but his character goes through a change and his palette gets darker, and then I completely kind of change his look towards the end of the series.
It
Um,
reminds me a little bit of like, I don't know if I will reveal my age now. It's like Firestarter. Remember that
mhm,
Barrymore movie? But anyway, it reminds me a little bit of that. And here's Michael B. Jordan,
yeah.
being all fine. So um, you have so much work behind you, right?
Yes.
And so I just like, where do you see yourself? Like, what do you think is next, for you? Like, you seem to be like on a really amazing trajectory here,
I don't know, honestly, right now because of this pandemic.
Yeah.
So, full disclosure, after we wrapped Judas and the Black Messiah, I moved back east and I had a job lined up. I was supposed to do a movie with Chiwetel Ejiofor, his
Yes.
second directorial project, and I was supposed to start the week the pandemic struck New York and we got shut down. So, and after that, I had pretty much work like lined up for the rest of the year, which is like the first time in my career, in my life, I had like, oh, I know what I'm doing for the rest of the year. Like Raising Dion was coming back. And then there was a couple other projects being thrown about. I have a really good relationship with Macro, who produces Racing Dion and also was a producer for Juice and the Black Messiah. So I was like, oh, I'm set. And the pandemic hit and it totally made me reevaluate everything in my career.
Mhm.
And so my focus right now has been getting my database up and running, and it's up and running. It's Black Designer Database. And because I do a lot of projects about stories that take place in the diaspora. And if people don't know what I mean by that, that means like Black people all over the world. And so I end up a lot of times using Black designers to make it feel more authentic and just like our culture.
Yeah.
And so I've been, keeping a spreadsheet of Black designers for over the years. And like 2019, right before I did Astronomy Club, I was like, hey, and all the members of Astronomy Club were like, I want to wear Black designers. It's important that I wear Black designers. I want to wear Black designers. And they had an episode for the culture where they wore like nothing but Black designers in that episode.
Right.
And so I was like, okay. And then I was like, I think I need more Black designers. I feel like, because I had just finished See You Yesterday,
Yeah.
which I had a great success using a lot of Black designers
Yes.
and getting free stuff from Nike and Adidas and spending all my money on like, Black designers and small designers in Brooklyn to make
Yeah.
it feel like Brooklyn. And so I had great success with that. Like it was great conversations going on Twitter about clothes. People were emailing me and contacting me on social media, asking me where to get stuff. And so that was really dope. And but I was like, wait, I think like I've used all these people's stuff, and See You Yesterday just came out, and I need new sources. And so I put up a like a type form survey, and I got like 100 responses within like 24 hours of designers I'd never heard of.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, this is a thing. And then after that, colleagues of mine were like, hey, do you know of some Black designers I can use for this project I'm doing? And I was like, hey, I think this is like a consulting business, like, And so, I worked with my assistant and a web designer and built a site. It's blackdesignerdatabase.com. It's free for anyone to
We'll also
submit.
put that on the website, folks, in the
Mhm.
description. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's free for anyone to submit themselves or a friend as a Black designer, and then we vet them. We do offer services for costume designers, and we offer a like exclusive membership for designers who sign up for our mailing list, where they get specific opportunities. And and it's good because it's kind of like helping the designers that can't afford like PR and like placements. They can't afford to pay like a showroom $10,000 a month and a PR person thousands of dollars a month. So it's like you can sit on our email list, and it's like a really affordable annual rate of $79 right now. And we will send you opportunities as they come up. And and it's like invest in your business. You know what I mean? Like that's not a lot to invest in your business, especially if you're just starting out.
That's blackdesignerdatabase.com, folks, and
Mhm.
is it just designers, Charlize, or do you do illustrators too? Or do you do like, sort of like design adjacent stuff?
Not yet, because I feel like there's a lot of other organizations popping up that specialize in like,
Yes.
stylists, costume designers,
Yeah.
illustrators. Mine is specifically trying to get people who are interested in product placement in touch with costume designers right now. It might expand to home goods or, other kinds of products, but right now I think keeping it specific to what I know best, which is clothing, and can make connecting those dots between, designers and costume designers. And like those are my two networks. I think like right now I'm just gonna stay in that lane.
I love that because you're also giving, as a resource for us as costume designers, right? Like
Hmm.
I actually, to be honest, like I'm like, who are the up and coming like black designers now? Like I want this character to wear a black designer, right? But
Hmm. Hmm.
also the visibility that you're giving to all these designers is unbelievable. So thank you for doing that.
Thank
I
you.
mean,
Thank you.
like, that is just like service to the community. And I think we just have a few more minutes left. Joanna, did you have a question or?
No, the idea of the Black Designer Database is really fascinating because I think that it also helps to level that playing field, right? It's
Hmm.
so important to actually make sure that people's voices are being heard and being seen because I feel like, especially in this last few months, like we've started to realize like shopping at BIPOC owned businesses, like how important that is and how we can make sure that these businesses stay open and stay functional and viable for everyone. It's just, that's really beautiful. So thank you.
Thank you. And folks, I mean, just to sort of like radiate this, right? Like when we talk about like jobs for people of color, we also have to acknowledge that people of color are actually the ones who are most affected by the pandemic right now, just like by disproportionate numbers, right? So particularly Black and brown bodies are what's affected right now. So when we talk about like, you know, like the Black Designer Database that Charlese started, that has repercussive like effects to all throughout the community. Um, Charlese, what would you say to a young designer, who wants to do what you want to do and, who wants to be you? Like, what would you, or even just like a student right now who has never considered this a career path?
What would I say to a young me or just a young student? I would say it's a long game. I'm gonna seem like an overnight success to a lot of people because they haven't heard of me, and now I'm getting all this press from this movie. But this has been more than a decade of work that I've put in. About 12 years I've been in this business.
IMDb her, friends, like you see the body of work. And also all of the sort of like the assistant, associate, PA work is
Mhm.
all listed there. So you'll see a trajectory. Sorry, Charlize.
No, you're fine. Yeah, so it's a long game. It's a long game, and you need to be strategic. I think what you're saying about like my projects being political and like I think you see how like strategic I was about picking projects that spoke to me that and also were going to go out in the world in a particular way. So I would say also be strategic. Don't be afraid to work really hard. Don't be afraid to ask questions, advocate for yourself. If you work with someone and you enjoy working with them, keep in touch with them
Mhm.
because you will probably keep working with them if you are good about keeping in touch. True
Yeah.
story. Um, the guy who ended up being Daniel and Lakeith's basically personal costumer on Judas and the Black Messiah called me for a year before I actually hired him, and and we ended up working together on a few projects before that, and and I really like I think I did a good job in just like teaching him how things go so that if he worked with someone else, he would be good. And he would call me or text me from other jobs and be like, "Man, I miss you. It's not like how we work." He's like, "But I'm good though." He's like, "I'm good though, but it's not like how we work. You
Yeah.
explain stuff better." And and he just so I would say be persistent. If there's someone that you really admire and want to work with, and you have a way to personally connect with them, be persistent because we're very busy and it's not personal.
Thank you.
Like when I get into a project and it's like go time, I'll spin around and 4 months have gone by and I'm like, whoa, you know? So like be persistent, be kind, always send thank you notes. Always, if you can afford to get a little wrap gift, like nothing out of your budget, it always goes a long way when you wrap a job to get someone who got you the job a little something. But at the very least, a thank you note goes a long way. If you want to work with someone and you're having a hard time like getting them to talk to you, invite them out to tea or coffee. That goes a long way because a lot of times we just get people asking us for information that never offer to like pay for a drink. So,
thank you. Look, I mean, talented, political, and with home training, folks. Come on. So thank you for saying all of that, because I actually think that sort of like falls to the wayside. I think it's really important. I also, I'm going to fail if I don't mention that you are a big proponent of mentorship, so, a lot of the work that you do is actually just mentoring young Black women. So I think, that's also something like,
and men, Black women, men,
young men and women. Yep.
Brown people. I mean, anyone who doesn't have like a clear path to join this industry. I mean, it's not exclusive to people of color. I've had also like, I've had all kinds of people work. Like it's not just people of color. It's just the like
rainbow
if
color.
If you're passionate and you're really stuck and you don't really know how to get in this industry, and you find me, you'll probably call me.
Oh my God.
Because you're like, how does she do it?
It's also really exciting to hear about, the fact that you didn't actually go to school for this, because I think that that's always the thing that I hear so much. Like, how do I start when I don't actually have a foothold in the industry? Like, how do I begin?
Yeah.
And that hearing that story was, yes, but also like hearing that was really, it's heartening to hear, but to know that that path exists.
Yeah,
it's a little trickier now because like they basically outlawed interns on especially like studio projects and stuff. But if you can find a way to intern through your school, because you can still intern and apprentice through certain schools and colleges have programs with the studios. I know in New York they have the Made in New York program where they train you up to be a good PA, and costume supervisors use those lists to hire costume PAs a lot of times when they need additionals and stuff like that. So there's ways, but I don't know if it's happening the way I got in, where I literally showed up and worked for free and no one knew me.
Yeah, same. I'm always torn about it, right? Because like, when for me, when I was coming up, like I didn't really, there were jobs that I didn't get paid for, you know what I mean? But then part of me also feels like, okay, great. So a lot of these folks are actually getting paid now. So maybe that's a good thing. Charlese, best of luck on the movie. I mean, you're just gonna kick, you know what I mean? Like, it's gonna be amazing.
Thank you.
Tell us again when it's coming up.
Yes. So it's Judas and the Black Messiah. The release date is February 12th on HBO Max and in theaters wherever if you live somewhere where there's a theater open, you should be able to go check it out there. But most of us will be watching it on HBO Max. I'm sorry, international friends, it's not on HBO Max internationally, but it should be in theaters internationally.
Yeah, and we'll put all of that information on the information for this recording, and visit Charlese's website, which is charleseantoinette.com, and thank you, and keep on keeping on. God bless you. It's so wonderful to meet you, and thank you for gracing us with your presence.
Oh. No, thank you for having me, and thanks for asking fun and engaging questions. I always love talking to people in the business because it's like, oh, we're gonna have fun.
I could talk to you all night, So thank you, everybody. And our next talk is with Mia Neal, the hair designer for Ma Rainey. So that's gonna be an interesting talk too. All right, thank you, friends. Bye.
Thank you.